मंत्रालय की प्रेस वार्ता हो रही है, सीधे वहां का रुख करते हैं।
Privilege of having with us Honorable External Affairs Minister Dr. S Jaishankar to do the briefing on this occasion and take your questions. I'd also like to thank the presence of Honorable Ministers of State, Shri V. Muralidharan, Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, Shri R.R. Singh, as well as Foreign Secretary Shri Vinay Quatra on the dais. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Secretaries Shri Saurabh Kumar, Secretary CPV and OIA Dr. Asif Saeed, Secretary External Relations, Economic Relations Shri Dammu Ravi, as well as Special Secretary ER and DPA Shri Prabhat Kumar. So, may I request you to make opening remarks, after which we'll take. You can do it from there also, sir, it's convenient. So.
I don't need that. A very good morning to all of you. My namaskar. Our ministers of state, our secretaries, and friends of the media. It's really a very great pleasure to talk to all of you today as we mark the completion of 9 years of the Modi government. I think most of you would not dispute that among the many areas where there's been a significant transformation, foreign policy would surely be among them. It's reflected in the country's higher standing, greater influence, bigger footprint, new concepts, and stronger delivery. Now, there are many ways by which one can judge how foreign policy has changed, how it has delivered, where has it made its deepest impact. I would like to pick two broad themes today as the metrics by which you can evaluate Indian foreign policy over the last 9 years. The first theme is, how does the world see India today? And the second is really, how has foreign policy affected the lives of the common citizen? So those are really the two perspectives from which I would like to present to you the foreign policy of the last 9 years. Now, in terms of how the world sees India today, I think you can't get a better set of people than those sitting on the podium to give you that view, because we travel out, we engage people on behalf of India, we talk to the leaderships in different places, since we travel around, we mix with many sections of society. So what, in a sense, I present to you is a accumulation of our collective experiences. And if I were to pick them, probably the one which I would start off with is how much today the world, especially the global south, perceives India as a development partner, as a credible, effective development partner with delivery on the ground. And I'm just reminded of my last visit. I came back yesterday morning from Namibia. And I inaugurated formally a Center of Excellence in IT, which has been functioning there for about a year and a half. And the impact on the Technology University of Namibia by our giving a Palm supercomputer, having trainers out there, working with them, developing cybersecurity skills, developing entrepreneurial skills, promoting research. I cannot describe to you the excitement in the university. Or I look at the trip before that, a very different place and a very different subject. I was in Guyana, and it so happened at that time we were delivering for the first time ever a ferry. A first time ever ferry that far away, the continent, to the southern, to the western hemisphere, that too in the south. And the ferry had a transformational message for the Guyanese, because it made suddenly the islands and even the coastline far more accessible. So actually you had the entire Guyanese cabinet, the previous president, everybody really turn out because for them it was such a big event. A little bit before that I was in Mozambique I was urged to take a ride on a train which we had supplied. It wasn't just a train. We actually made possible the beginnings of a suburban rail system in Maputo, which would decongest that city, because the kind of trains and the price points and the quality that we did, that actually had a really a very big impact on the planning. I could give you many more examples. In Kenya, there's a textile factory which was closed down, which we helped to revive. Every Kenyan, if you use the word Rivatex, every Kenyan knows this textile factory. Or indeed, go to Mauritius, they are enormously proud of this Metro Express, which was built by an Indian company based on development support. And it isn't just my experience. I mean, my colleagues would vouch for something similar happening with them. Dr. Ranjan was telling me about a cardamom seed center, which he had seen in Laos. Or Muralidharanji was talking about entrepreneurship development centers, which he saw in Djibouti and I think in Rwanda. Am I correct? So wherever you go today, and I want you to understand today how big our development footprint is. It is today extending across 78 nations, and we have done more than 600 major projects. Most of all, the impact is actually in our own neighborhood. That if you look, we've just had the visit of Nepal's Prime Minister, again, there was a stock taking of, and frankly, satisfaction at a lot of what has been achieved, a lot of new projects which are coming on stream. But if you look at the neighborhood at South Asia, in the last 9 years, whether it is power transmission, power generation, whether it is diesel supply, fuel supply, whether it is bridges, roads, railways, ICPs, actually the region is changing, ferry in the case of Maldives. So the first point I want to make to you is a large part of the world today sees us as a development partner, not just as a development partner who lives up to what Prime Minister enunciated as the Kampala principles, which is we do with our partners what is their priority. So it is, one part of it is the credibility, one part of it is also what is it we are doing. It is something which is important for them. They have determined what it is, or we have mutually determined what it is. And that, I think, today has very significantly enhanced our standing. The second image of India today is of an economic collaborator. An economic collaborator not just with the developing South, but with the global economy. And you can see that in terms of the FDI flows, in terms of the increased exports, in terms of actually this very important conversation taking place in the world today about trusted collaboration. I was in my last visit to the US, and Foreign Secretary has just come back, he's taken that forward. The American Semiconductor Association told me that to the best of their knowledge, they employ at least 40,000 engineers in India on chips design alone. And that's just the bit which they know. So the point I want to make here is, apart from development in terms of South-South, there is a larger economic impact we are making, and that is today increasingly recognized. And the third is really as a contributor. And perhaps there cannot be a better example of our contribution than Vaccine Maitri. I mean, even today, when you go around the world, actually people get emotional talking about the arrival of vaccines. The other example I would cite to you is our growing capability and a growing record as a first responder. We initially did more of this in our immediate neighborhood, but I think slowly with the passage of time that has extended beyond, and you saw really how speedy and effective we were in responding to the Turkey earthquake. Now, apart from these, I could cite to you the examples of the International Solar Alliance or the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure as examples where we have contributed. But we can also contribute in terms of economic stabilization. And you all saw what happened to Sri Lanka last year and this year. That at a time when much of the world sat on its hands, we actually stepped forward at a very, very crucial time to stabilize the Sri Lankan economy. And today, if it is on the mend, I think a large part of it is due to the fact that we responded in a timely manner. Now, beyond that, I've spoken about the development economic side, the contributions we make. We also bring value. And because we bring value, there is a lot of interest today in partnering with India or getting India to join an organization. So if you look at the last 9 years, you've had the Quad, you've had the I2U2, you had the Shanghai, our membership of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You've had bilaterally a lot of migration mobility agreements. You had the FIPEC platform, you had the Nordics format, you had our entry into export control regimes, because clearly our presence there has a additional value to their effectiveness. If I were to pick another facet, I would say we are also today narrative shapers. And perhaps the most effective example of that is the rush, I would say almost the pressure that we have each time Raisina dialogue is held. That today the people want to listen to India, they want to be seen with India, they do feel that working with us expands and sharpens their own influence as well. But it's not just a conference, it's also on important subjects. You can see it on climate change. You could see it when PM went to Glasgow or to Paris. You can see it in counter-terrorism. The fact that the no money for terror actually got so much more traction after it was held in India. You can see it in a concept, how rapidly Indo-Pacific and Quad have taken root in the global strategic lexicon. You can see it in something like LIFE, which Prime Minister and UN Secretary General initiated last October. Or you could see it just in culture. In fact, Meenakshi ji was, every time she goes to Central Asia, and she was talking to me about her experience to Uzbekistan, that the impact today we are making, because we are proud of our traditions, others also are feeling that and wanting to absorb that in different ways. And, they celebrate it along with us. Now, that picture which I put to you obviously has to be underpinned by politics. And here I think the last few years, if anything, have only underlined India's credentials, India's standing, India's DNA, I would say almost, as an independent force. Now you're all aware of the debates in the last year about Ukraine and various ramifications. That's one example, I would say, of where we were clear from the very start about taking an independent stance, not just on the conflict itself, but on the various ramifications of that conflict. But I could share with you other examples. The Quad. Do remember, the Quad was first an idea which came about in 2007. And then in 2008, everybody buckled to pressure. 10 years later, when this time around we were doing Quad, it was not that there wasn't pressure. It was just that we didn't bend. So, Quad too is an example of our independence, as indeed is the voice of Global South. We are the first G20 president who have actually made an effort to consult other people. And 125 countries responded because they believed we are an independent voice. So when I say, how does the world look at us? There can be no bigger endorsement of our standing than the manner in which 125 countries responded during the Voice of Global South. But it can also be on the ground. You know, when we stand up on our northern borders vis-a-vis China, when we take a clear stand on Belt and Road, those two are examples of our independence. That we are not swayed by either coercion or by inducements or by false narratives. So the facets of how the world looks at us obviously also is influenced by to some extent how we look after our own people. And during COVID, a lot of countries left their nationals to fend for themselves. I think we were the other extreme. No other country did as much as we did. We brought back directly during COVID itself at least 70 lakh people who in some way had been stranded or were compelled to come back to India. We also have in these 9 years created the systems for it. So there are systems for people to come back, but there are also systems to support them when they are abroad. So if Indians are in distress, the Indian Community Welfare Fund, the expansion of it and the repurposing of it, I think was very, very useful during this COVID. And of course, most of all, you have seen these repeated operations. I mean, somehow it has happened from 2014. Almost every year, I mean, it's a reflection of the state of the world, that almost every year we have had to undertake some operation somewhere. It's a reflection of the world, but it's also a reflection of the globalization of India, that our people, I mean, I'm sure many of you would not have anticipated that we would have 5,000 nationals in Sudan, or that we had 20,000 students in Ukraine, or that we would have people stuck in South Sudan or even in Afghanistan as Kabul was falling. So I would say, it's one thing, of course, and I'll come to that, what difference it makes to our citizens. But I must also tell you, the world watches us. I mean, what we did in Ukraine was the subject of numerous conversations with my counterparts, and I've heard, people, presidents and prime ministers also speak to our own prime minister in that regard. But while we look after our own, we also take pride, and I think the world recognizes that we are genuinely international. We are international, and that is exhibited in what we are doing on climate action. What, as I said, we did on vaccines through Vaccine Maitri and through supply of medicines. What we are doing in terms of food, the millets, again, Namibia, they were very interested in working with us on production and expanding production and consumption of millets, or on counter-terrorism, or on creating more reliable and resilient supply chains. First responder certainly highlights our credentials, or on maritime security. So if you look at the activities of India in different domains, yes, there is a strong sense this is a country today determined to look after the interests, the welfare of its people, but it is also a government very much committed to to global good, to internationalism. And I think that message too, it resonates particularly strongly in the South, but I think not only in the South. I think much of the world today appreciates it, and they actually see us in a way as a force of good. But while I speak about all of this, I think what really fascinates the world today is actually not what we are only doing in foreign policy. It is what we are doing in domestic policy. It is actually the huge domestic transformation, especially how we have today used the digital medium for the delivery of public goods and services. How we are today really transforming Indian society in terms of social development goals, the literacy missions, the gender effort, the Jal Jeevan mission, the electricity connections, the Swachh Bharat. I think these are today, and these are today, clearly for a lot of developing countries, this is an exemplar. But it's not again only developing countries. There are countries who actually look at it in terms of, one country, for example, which showed a lot of interest on the digital, on UPI, was Singapore. And already Singapore, I was told, more than $1 billion have come through the UPI system to India. Japan was very interested in UPI. When people looked today at the India stack, and if I were to move to the technology area at what we are doing on 4G, 5G, that interest is not just in the developing world, it's also equally in the developed world. So the domestic progress, I would say, that too has made, not that too, I would say that most of all, has made actually a huge impact on the thinking of the world. So after 9 years, I can really say without hesitation that in terms of our standing, in terms of where we are in global consciousness, it is something very much deeper than before. Now, let me say a few words about how the average citizen has benefited. I think to start with, the average citizen has seen enhanced security. If I were to start in the east, the land boundary agreement with Bangladesh particularly has had a transformational impact on the northeast. It has allowed progress, it has allowed in fact not just better law and order and stability in northeast, but also given northeast a connectivity through Bangladesh in this improved climate. The fact that I think we are countering Chinese actions on the northern borders, I think has also enhanced security, as indeed the fact that we have delegitimized terrorism from across the Pakistani border. So today, I would say the activities of Indian diplomacy clearly have made the nation more secure. But they have also made the nation much more stronger economically. And again, I can cite to you different metrics for measuring that. It could be in greater exports, in bigger FDI flows, in stronger technology collaborations, in today in softening oil prices. Because had our diplomacy not done its work, I think it would have had an impact on the petrol pump. In fertilizer costs, that given how big, fertilizer is one of our key imports. So working with our counterparts there, we have actually stabilized the market and reached long-term agreements which definitely benefit the country and benefit Indian farmers. And between fertilizer, oil costs, I think it has an impact on inflation as well. And regionally, I would say particularly Northeast, I think economic activity in Northeast has definitely benefited from what Indian diplomacy has delivered. But another area where I think the common citizen has benefited is actually in greater mobility and greater opportunity abroad. I have spoken about the mobility agreements that we've done. We've done it now with a number of countries, with Portugal, with UK, just done with Germany, Austria, Australia. And where our workers or professionals go abroad, I think we have today much better systems for their welfare as well. And it's particularly important, as Mulli ji will tell you, in the Gulf, where actually the working conditions of people who go are much better as a result of agreements we have concluded. But underlying all of this is actually a great public service revolution we have done, and that is in the field of passports. In 2014, there were 77 passport seva kendras in the country. Since then, we added 16 passport seva lagu kendras and 430 passport seva kendras located in post offices. So essentially what was below 100 today is in excess of 500. and the convenience to people, because we who live in cities still do not understand how hard it is just to get to a passport seva kendra. So the fact that we have made the passport kendra, the servicing center, the collection center, the delivery center so much more widely distributed in this country, that has had a huge impact. And if you look at passport figures, we were issuing less than 9 million passports, 8.7 actually, in 2014. Today we are issuing more than 14 million passports. And the only reason we are doing 14 is that we have to ramp up the capability, and actually the faster we process it, we are very confident this demand will keep going up. And one part of it is we are making it easier to get passports. I mean, I think your personal experiences would tell you that it has actually, the speed at which you get it is significantly better than what it was a decade ago. But it's also happened abroad, because remember, we render more than 1 million passport services out of the country. And out of the country before, the time period was enormous because you had to go through a cumbersome process of checking. Today, actually, because there is a database called GPSP, that it is possible, and 181 embassies and consulates are connected. There are a few who still have to be done. But even replacement or renewal of passports abroad has become very much easier. So whether it is the ability to travel abroad, the mobility agreements, the totalization issues we are pushing, the specialized skilled workers which we are giving access to, I think these today have been a change. A fourth area, of course, is in technology capabilities. And I think the more we collaborate globally in technology, it could be G2G, it could be B2B, it could be G2B, it could be best practices, it could be projects. So the combination of all of this, you can see there's a very conscious drive for technology upgrades, and that is today actually opening many new opportunities for the youth, especially for the youth of this country. The fourth is, of course, security abroad. I have spoken about multiple operations. The Indian Community Welfare Fund, the consular services, even something like students. Today, students know that whether it is their legitimate case for working hours or other difficulties that they face, sometimes even security issues, that the government of India will back them up, and back them up perhaps in a manner in which we didn't do before. And finally, I would say there is a cultural respect for us today. There is a cultural respect, and there are a variety of reasons for it. Part of it is also that we ourselves have globalized many of our practices. I think the International Day of Yoga is not just a shared celebration. I think it's also a shared understanding of what is happening in India. And that is extending to other fields, could be Ayurveda, it could be in a way our way of life. So anybody going out today, I think an Indian going out today is more likely to be, in a sense, understood by the rest of the world. And all of this I'm not suggesting is only due to government efforts. I think there are a lot of other independent processes in play. But certainly we help to guide it, channel it, encourage it. So if this is the picture I present to you, I would like to end very briefly with my sense of what has changed in 9 years. Why has this happened? I think it has happened, first of all, because where foreign policy is concerned, starting from day one, when you saw the leaders of our neighbors present at the oath taking of the Council of Ministers in 2014, starting from day one till now, there has been strategic clarity. There has been strategic clarity in terms of understanding the world, in organizing ourselves into a neighborhood first circle, extended neighborhoods, the Sagar, Africa beyond, the major powers. So how we perceive the world and how we interact with the world and how we develop policies for each of those and for combinations of these, I think that is to me a number one reason. And along with that, in this phrase which has been used, hesitations of history, that we are no longer a prisoner of our past, that if there are gains to the country, if there are benefits for our citizens, we are not held back because of ideological reservations. Along with that, I would say the strategic communication, that we are able, probably if you look at us, I would say not only us ministers, but even the secretaries or probably my colleagues who are in different MEA buildings, we are far more intensely active and interactive than those before us. I'm not in any way disrespecting those people. I think it is partly the situation. It is the big picture which is also, it is also the greater interest. The fact that the world wants to deal more with us. But what it has done is this dynamic of our capabilities and change, the world's interest, then our response, I think it has created today a virtuous cycle in diplomacy, which is part of this change. The third reason is a confidence in handling multipolarity and multi-alignment. Because one of the dilemmas, long-standing dilemmas for Indian foreign policy is, if the world is polarized or there are multiple centers of power, how do you deal with all of them? And I would suggest to you that we have done it, especially in the last 9 years, with a great deal of confidence, with results to show for it. And if you look at the major power centers, with the exception of China, for reasons which all of you are aware, I would say almost every one of these accounts has progressed, some of them in actually very challenging circumstances. A fourth reason is actually what has changed is the delivery focus. That it isn't just that you go declare something and then let it happen in its own speed, and sometimes they never happen. The sense within the government that there has to be delivery, there has to be timeline, there has to be budget, and this is backed up by monitoring. So, within the government, there is a very famous exercise called Pragati. And this Pragati model, which Prime Minister himself started and which we have departmentalized internally as well, that we keep drilling down to see why is a project stuck, why is something not moved, where are our promises, what has been delivered, what is still pending. So the whole delivery monitoring, I think, aspect, that has been, if you ask me, one of the hallmarks really of the Modi government's administrative style. The fourth is, of course, what I said, the people-centric view. Improving passports could have happened earlier if people felt it was important. If you actually put citizens at the center. Worrying about people abroad. There could be tourists, there could be seafarers, there could be students. Why, in a way you could ask yourself, why are we doing these operations year after year? Why do we battle for our students? Why do we push embassies to give visas? Why are we strengthening passport system? Because at the end of the day, I think this people-centric view of governance, of responsibility, which includes obviously diplomacy and foreign policy, I think that is something which has been part of the change. I would also say there's a greater pride in the country. There's a stronger belief in our culture, heritage, civilization. That has certainly, if our self-belief is stronger, certainly the world looks at you with greater respect. And as I said, at the end of the day, there is an international outlook which the Modi government has brought to bear, and that certainly boosted international cooperation. So the picture, and I'd conclude with that, the picture that I really present to you is at home a much greater, I would say, sensitivity to people's needs, a conscious effort to associate them with foreign policy, and you can see that most of all in the manner in which we have marking the G20 presidency, the Jan Bhagidari approach, which is quite unique in our diplomatic annals, I think in many ways reflects the Modi government's approach. But you can see it abroad. You all know that in the next few days, Prime Minister Modi would be undertaking what is only the third state visit, and he would be the first Indian leader to address the US Congress twice. The month after that, he's going as the chief guest on Bastille Day, I think July 14th. You saw the welcome, the respect that he got in Papua New Guinea, or the welcome that he got in Australia. I spoke to you about the responses of the Global South and the Voice of Global Summit, of the Global South Summit. So I think in all objectivity, the report card of the Indian foreign policy of the last 9 years under the Modi government is a very solid report card. It is a report card not just in terms of respect and outcomes. It is also a report card which tells every Indian citizen that they are more secure traveling abroad, that we have their back, tells every citizen that foreign policy at the end of the day is purposed for their benefit, for their welfare, with their interests at heart. And that is really the report card that we would like to put before the nation today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, sir. Before we take questions, let me let out the ground rules. Because of time constraints, we will only take one question per person. I see lots of hands. Patience, please. Please introduce yourself as well as the organization that you represent, and we'll take questions in groups of 3. Maybe I'll start with the lady there. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. This is Yeshi Seli from the New Indian Express. So the fate of 700 Indian students studying in Canada is under limbo, and they are probably going to be deported on June the 13th. Is there something that the government is likely to do? And in addition, there was this procession which was taken out in Brampton yesterday where they were glorifying the assassination of late Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. So is there anything